The sun had not yet risen when Raghavan opened his eyes. The rooster had not crowed, the village road was silent, and even the wind seemed to be asleep. Still, Raghavan woke up every day at the same time, as he had done for more than 30 years. He sat on the edge of his wooden cot and listened to the quiet breathing of the land. For him, this silence was not empty. It was full of promises and worries, hopes and fears. He washed his face at the hand pump outside his small house. The water was cold, but it made him feel alive. His wife, Mira, was already awake, lighting the stove in the kitchen. She handed him a cup of hot tea without saying much. They did not need words in the early morning. Years of shared life had taught them to understand each other through small actions. Raghavan picked up his sickle and walked toward his fields. The sky slowly changed color, from deep blue to soft orange. Birds began to sing, and the smell of wet soil filled the air. This land was not just soil to him, it was his past, his present, and his future. His father had tilled this land before him, and his grandfather before that. As a child, Raghavan had run barefoot across these fields, chasing butterflies and dreaming of becoming a big man in the city. But life had other plans. When his father fell ill, Raghavan left school and took responsibility for the farm. He never complained. He believed that the land would take care of him if he took care of it. This year, however, the land was silent in a different way. The monsoon had been late and the rains were uncertain. The crops were growing, but not as strongly as before. Raghavan bent down and touched the leaves of his plants. They felt weak, thirsty. He whispered softly, as if the plants could hear him. Just a little more patience. By mid-morning, the sun was high. Raghavan worked steadily, removing weeds, checking irrigation channels, and repairing a broken fence. Sweat ran down his back, but he did not stop. Every movement of his hands showed years of experience. He knew the soil by touch, the weather by smell, and time by the position of the sun. At noon, he sat under a neem tree and ate his simple meal of rice and vegetables. As he ate, his thoughts wandered to his son, Arjun, who lived in the city. Arjun worked in an office and often told his father to sell the land and move to town. "Farming is too hard," Arjun would say over the phone. "There is no future in it." Raghavan never argued. He only smiled and said, "This land fed you when you were young. It still has a future." But deep inside, he felt a small fear. What if Arjun was right? What if the land could no longer provide? What would happen when Raghavan became too old to work? That afternoon, dark clouds gathered in the sky. Raghavan looked up with hope. The wind picked up, and the air smelled heavy. A few drops of rain fell on his face. He closed his eyes and smiled. Rain was coming. But the joy did not last long. The rain turned into a violent storm. Strong winds bent the crops, and heavy rain flooded the fields. Raghavan ran, trying to open channels to drain excess water, but the storm was too strong. By evening, the fields were damaged. Plants lay flat on the ground, broken and drowned. Raghavan stood silently in the rain, watching months of hard work disappear in a few hours. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from helplessness. When he finally walked home, his clothes were soaked and his heart felt heavier than his body. Mira did not ask questions. She dried his clothes and served him warm food. Later that night, Raghavan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about loans, seeds, and the next season. Sleep came slowly. The next morning, Raghavan returned to the fields. The damage was clear. Neighbors came by, shaking their heads in sympathy. Some talked about quitting farming, others about migrating for work. Raghavan listened quietly. He felt tired, but something inside him refused to give up. Instead of surrendering, he started again. He removed the damaged plants and saved what he could. He visited the local agriculture office to learn about new methods. He attended a training program on organic farming and water conservation. It was difficult to change old habits, but Raghavan was willing to learn. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the land began to respond. The soil improved, and the plants grew healthier. It was not easy, and progress was slow, but there was hope. One evening, Arjun came home unexpectedly. He saw his father working late in the field, his hands covered in mud, his face tired but calm. For the first time, Arjun did not see a poor farmer. He saw strength, patience, and dignity. That night, father and son talked for a long time. Raghavan spoke about the land, the storms, the failures, and the small victories. Arjun listened. He realized that farming was not just a job, it was a way of life. "I want to help," Arjun said quietly. "Maybe I don't know much about farming, but I can learn, and I can use my education to improve things." Raghavan's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. It was not happiness alone, it was relief. The next season was better, not perfect, but better. The harvest was enough to clear some debts and save a little. More importantly, the farm felt alive again. Years passed. Raghavan grew older, his steps slower, his hands rougher. But he never stopped visiting the fields every morning. Sometimes Arjun walked beside him. Sometimes his grandchildren ran ahead, laughing. The land changed, the world changed, but one thing remained the same: Raghavan's belief that hard work, patience, and respect for nature would always find a way. One early morning, as the sun rose over green fields, Raghavan stood quietly, leaning on his stick. He breathed in the familiar smell of earth and smiled. The land had tested him many times. It had taken and given, broken and healed. And in return, Raghavan had given it his life. Not in words, not in promises, but in every seed he planted, every drop of sweat he shed, and every sunrise he welcomed with hope.